Hi, everyone, and welcome to Misa's webinar with Sandra Mollon. I am Annie Meach, and I have the pleasure of hosting this webinar and introducing you to one of our fabulous quilting instructors, Sandra Mollon. Sandra, thank you for being with us here today. Before I hand the webinar over to you for your fabulous presentation, I'd like to share with our audience a bit about our program if they're not familiar with us and the workshop you have coming up with us this February 3rd to the 7th in Tucson. Sandra will be teaching her fused art quilts from photographs with us. And just to start our slideshow here we go. This workshop, February 3rd through the 7th, 2025, will be held at our Southwest campus at the Tonka Verde Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. This historic campus is the oldest dude ranch in the state and home to 200 horses and a talented staff ready to help you make the most of your getaway with us. You'll have a beautiful backdrop of the Rincon Mountains and the Saguaro National Park at your back door. And this location provides endless opportunities for inspiration for your quilts and exploration. While you're staying with us, you'll enjoy our comfortable accommodations and have every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner prepared for you so that you can focus on what you came for, immersing yourself in your art with our talented instructor, Sandra Mollon. I hope you'll join us there. And with that, I'm going to hand this webinar over to our fabulous Sandra. And Sandra, if you wouldn't mind just giving the audience a little bit of more information about yourself, that will be wonderful.
Yes, happy to do that. I was very fortunate that we moved to a house in about 1988 that we were renting, and the previous tenant was a quilter. And I know this because number one, I saw her stash and I was shocked. I didn't know anybody bought that much fabric at the time. And then secondly, a magazine, a quilting magazine, came to the mailbox that, hadn't caught up with her yet for mail forwarding. And as I'm browsing through this magazine, I realized that, hey, I really want to make a quilt. And it was just, something from that moment on, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I think since I learned to quilt that year, I started learning to quilt that year. And I tell people, I don't think a day has passed in my life since then that I haven't at least thought about quilting, like things I wanted to do or things I was excited about, or attending shows or classes or workshop, or actively participating in making quilts. I started out very traditional, making very traditional, first pieced quilts and then hand applique quilts. And eventually I actually have a very traditional quilt in Paducah at the National Quilt Museum there that got in 2018, I think, or yeah, I think it's 2018. So since that point, though, I did a little pivot and I started to do raw edge fused art collage, which is now my passion. And I think it'll be the thing I do for the rest of my life because I love it so much. You can see a quilt behind me. You'll see this picture coming up in my little slideshow. Where you'll see this quilt in entirety. But this is a quilt that was derived from a photo from a friend of mine, John Slott. He sent it to me. He's like, here, make a quilt out of this image. And I was like, okay. I looked at all those little pieces and I thought this one's going to be a challenge. But it's turned out to be one of my absolute favorite pieces. I think the Southwest landscape is just so beautiful in its, stark simplicity sometimes of the skyline and the colors of the Grand Canyon. And this quilt was actually nominated. I was nominated to be registered in the Historical Society as an artist of the Grand Canyon, just based on this piece. So I'm anxious to share my little slideshow with you. And Annie, are we ready to go into that right now? Can I go ahead and switch? Yes?
Yes, you
All
can.
right.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go ahead then and put up my webinar. Let me just get to there we go. And I'm going to share and hit play. And now hopefully everybody's seeing the introductory slide. And I can see Annie's little face in the corner, and so she can always nod at me and let me know if things are looking good on that end. Also, If you have any questions as we go and you type them into the chat window, Annie can flag me down and I can't see the chat window, but she can. I don't mind stopping and answering questions as we go. So feel free to pop some questions out to you. I like to start with this particular image a lot of times because it's one of my personal favorite quilts. It's called River Rocks. It's not very tall. It's only about 23 inches high, I think, by about 54. So it's one of those long, narrow quilts. One of my friends, Ken Miracle, had posted a picture. I'm going to just tell you on Facebook, and I texted him right away and I'm like, can I use this image in an art quilt? And he was like, what? And then he was like, how is this going to happen? And I showed him some of the work that I did and he gave me permission. And I know he was enthusiastic about the piece when it was finished. For me, looking at this piece, and it's over my sewing machine right now, it just puts me in a very reflective and peaceful mood. I call this style of art kind of what I define it as is intimate landscapes. In other words, you're not seeing the grand vistas of mountains and lakes and big trees and stuff, but you're kind of hopefully when you see it, it kind of puts you in a mood of that you are in fact in that place, that you are in that river or watching that river and the sun's reflecting off that water. Which is where it puts me. Um, like I said, I didn't start out doing art quilts, and I I I travel so much and I meet so many people on airplanes and I tell them, we get into conversations with random strangers all the time. I do. And I say I'm a textile artist and they're like, what's that? And I'm like, I show them a picture and their immediate reaction is, wow, that's a quilt. Um, I love that, so I have a degree in science actually, and I was a biologist and I just feel like I've pivoted through so much in life from being a mom and I'm a grandma and raising my family with my husband and this is where I am now in my life. And I have to tell you, I couldn't be happier. One of the things that happens when I get into a classroom, like this one was in the Santa Fe campus earlier this year. And the student, Nicole Davis, she came in with a photo that you can see on the left. She obviously omitted the nice couple in the foreground and a couple other people that are in front of this. I think she was telling me that it's like a iconic Texas landmark. I don't myself remember. I've never been to this place, but I know it now. If I saw it in the photo, I'd be like, yes, I know this piece. I supported that class, and I always support my classes by bringing some extra stuff with me, some extra hand-dyed fabrics. And so she got the sky fabric from me. She brought a lot of batiks and she started working on this piece. Then the top that you see on the right is what she got done in 4 days. Now, you might think that Nicole was already very experienced. The truth of the matter is, I don't think she was. She was there with her mom. And I think that mom wanted her to do this class with her and visit Santa Fe and have that experience with her daughter. But I don't think that Nicole had a ton of experience in quilting. And I believe she told me in class that this was her first ever piece. But by the end of the class, she, during the final reveal, when we all put up our work to review it, and she had this quilt to pin up to her design wall, she told me that she felt like for the first time in her life that she could be an artist. And she was crying about this. This meant a lot to her. I want you to hear that because if you have never made any kind of textile art, you might think it's impossible to do. It isn't. Young Hee was in that same workshop, and she came with a photo that she took at Niagara Falls, obviously, and the poster that she's working from is there on the left, and then you can see how far she got just in that 4-day workshop, and then her final piece that she shared, you know, on Facebook recently that she got finished. She was so proud and so excited about this work. And I could already tell by even the 4 days of the workshop that it was going to be spectacular. And of course it is. And you definitely get a sense of the waterfall that was going over. And I'm starting this webinar showing you student work. I'm going to show you some of my pieces as well. But I was even asked this past year by another quilting instructor. She saw my class listings at a workshop, and she goes, "Do you honestly think your students are going to be able to do what you're teaching?" And I'm like, I absolutely know they can do what I'm teaching, because number one, I've taught this class many, many times. And so I have such a huge percentage of people that will either almost finish their top or will get within you know, far enough along in the workshop that we can see that they're doing just a fantastic job. We start with an enlargement. Like you can see Joan Kaiser's piece that she did in Santa Fe. She actually finished the top in that 4 days. It's amazing. But if you stop and you've traced your image from your enlargement, and you work with, you know, batiks, that a big chunk of batik or fabric that can fill in, you know, big areas of your design, it can go a lot faster than you think. And in fact, one of the things I bring to the table is new and improved cutting techniques that make the process so much easier. So congratulations to Joan for this lovely piece. And I'll show you just a couple more. Carolyn Butterfield was also with me in Santa Fe, but I think this is one that she'd done in a previous workshop. And I saw it recently on a video that's in Houston, so you might want to get to see it in person there if you're there this coming week. So I think she'd only gotten as far on the left in the 4 day workshop, but she eventually finished the top and quilted it. And I just love that rhino. I told her I have to do a rhino myself. I love it. And then this final one I want to show you, which you may have seen out in some of the ads. Ricky Selva did this in a workshop with me this past year. And this is as far as she got on her polar bear in a 4 day class. But everybody who was in that class knew that it was going to be phenomenal just from the face. And this is also at Houston right now in the animals exhibition. And you can see it's just absolutely stunning. And so congratulations to Ricky for such an amazing quilt. So let's take a look at some of mine. You know, some of the, you know, the images that I've done over the years aren't, you know, are fairly simple actually. This little elephant, baby elephant, is from a photo from a friend of mine. Uh, Sorry, I'm just drawing a quick blank. Patrick, and his last name will come to me in a minute. But his mom actually sent me this photo and asked me if I could make a quilt from her son's photo, and I did. And I think it's just really darling, and it's a pattern that you can get from my website. So if you're not confident about making your own quilt, I do have some patterns available. My friend Deb Simon also sent me an image of a quilt, and I did this one back in 2019. It's about 36 by 48, and I called this quilt the elephant in the room for lots of reasons, but for the main reason is that it was so large and it was on my design wall for, you know, the months I was working on it. And honestly, I would walk in and turn on the lights in my studio, and it was like looking at me. You know, there's lots of other reasons. And, you know, like one of the things I thought about as I was making this quilt was, you know, the endangered species. That definitely, you can't do an animal quilt without feeling that. And the connection to those animals while you're working on a piece. And here's another animal piece. This one also is one of my favorite pieces. It's a quilt that is called Mampala, Big Sis, and you can see the detail shot on the right. It's just one of the images that I have, gotten and have enjoyed making. Let's talk about, images. If you have a photo that you have taken yourself, that's always the best choice. Otherwise, if you know the person and they have given you permission to use their image, that is absolutely the important imperative that you make sure that they have um, recognize that you're going to make a quilt, that it may show in a show, and that you have permission. So my friend Deb Simon sent me this image to use from the Cincinnati Zoo, and I call this one Proud Mama. Not all my quilts are they're that big. This one may be about 24 by 36. It's a decent size, but not huge. Typically, I work in about a 36 by 48 inch format. And when I work on an image, I'm always looking for things like uh, personal challenges. For this one, of course, it was the idea of trying to like make the fur look, natural, the background looking textural, like they were in the jungle. I hand paint a lot of details on the fabric and then stitch them in. I do hand dye a fair amount of fabric. Here's another animal quilt, and I'm throwing out a bunch of animals. If you wanted to do an animal in any of my workshops, even if the theme of that workshop is landscape, like it is in Arizona, let me know, because usually I'm fine with making changes to accommodate whatever you want. Um, when I have a themed workshop, I support that themed workshop with hand-dyed fabrics that might be used in a landscape. And so if I know I have somebody coming with something different, then I have to prepare slightly different. But I just want you to know that those options are available to you. Don't let that stop you from signing up for a workshop. I will happily prepare extra stuff or extra samples for you if you need them. I just need to know that if you're signing up. This one, Beverly Thien took this photo that I used. It's called Black Paws. Again, this is just a little one, about 18 by about 24. My desire at that point was I was still trying to make sure that I could make a stitched collage look realistic with realism in fur. And then my polar bears also are in that, range. Another one from the Cincinnati Zoo with from Deb Simon. And I changed this one. I took out the wall that was behind them and put in a blue sky and added crystals for the stars. I love rocks though, and I was attracted to this one because it has both rocks and water and some reflection in it. It's a topic I just really enjoy doing. And so I love the polar bears. And this one, again, is in that 36 by 48 inch format. And, it's uh, title is called In Perfect Harmony. And the reason why I got that title is that I sent this photo out to my kids to see them, to show them what I was working on. And my son, added a little Coca-Cola can in between the paws of the baby uh, polar bear and said, "Here, Mom, I fixed it for you." And I laughed. Of course, I was not going to add a Coca-Cola can to my quilt. But when I asked for hints for a name, my daughter-in-law suggested the theme from the Coca-Cola commercial. We'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. So I used the imperfect harmony part of that is kind of a nod to the Coke commercials for those people who got that little subtle hint of a joke, but also because I do wish the world was in perfect harmony, and not only in all aspects of the world, but also ecologically, that we protect the environment for these beautiful animals. Just in case you wanted to know if I do other subjects, this one is a flower one. It's foxgloves at Windsor. It's only about 34 inches tall by about 28 inches wide. It was from a photo I took literally near the castle in Windsor, England. The flowers were so abundant there. This is a good example of the types of fabrics that I use, a lot of batiks, but also a lot of hand-dyed fabrics and inking. One of the things that occurred during the 4-day workshop is I basically never bother to bring in a chair for myself. I just rotate from table to table because one of the things that you get in a 4-day class with me that you can't get any other place, in a online or a Zoom class is the in-person help with your project. As you can imagine, this one required some inking to get those dots in the middle. So, I use that as my media of choice to add those details or shading, and I teach people that. And usually they're off and running with that. And then, of course, we don't get around to quilting during these classes, so you do not have to bring a sewing machine. But I go over it because, adding the quilting lines and the texture that you can get from the quilting is so important. And I think you can see all the textural elements I've added to this
Sandra,
quilt.
I have a question, if you wouldn't mind, from someone,
Sure.
just since we're talking about the detail parts of it. What paints do you use to hand paint?
I don't paint. I don't use paint. I mean, I know that paint is something that people do on fabric, and there are textile paints, but I'm inking. And ink is technically not a paint, I don't think, because it doesn't have a binder. So I am using things like Sukaneko inks and markers primarily. I do a little color pencil work and stuff like that, but I'm not buying or teaching people to use paint on fabric. And part of the reason is that I mastered inking back in the Baltimore series. And when you are familiar with one specific media, it's hard to just change in the middle of, and learn a whole new one. So I've worked with paints a little bit. I bought them. I felt like one of the disadvantages with painting on fabric is that it can be very opaque, where ink isn't. If I add an ink to a piece, say a batik, it's kind of transparent. You can still see the fabric underneath of it, and have that connection with the textile, which I still want. And I'm definitely not whole cloth painting, and I know that there's some amazing people out there who do that. But I like collage because if you're working along and you put something down in a collage that you don't like, the adhesive I use is so lightweight, I can just peel it right off and toss that little bit of fabric in the trash and try again. So that kind of aspect to my work of just using kind of a transparent ink on fabric and fusing, it means that if people are working in their process or I'm working on the process and I put something down and I don't like it, I can pull it up. And so that's important. So it's ink.
It
I
is
know
ink.
that was a
Okay. And
long
is it
answer. I know that was a
another
long
question
answer to a
was,
question.
well, it's not. No, it's super helpful, Sandra. And, just to add on to you, you mentioned about not bringing a chair into the workshop. I can attest
Right.
to, and so can all of these other students that have taken 4-day workshops with you. She doesn't sit down. She just continues to move around to every single table, helping people. That was one thing that struck me that was so incredible, Sandra. So, if you are new at this and it's something you haven't done, just know that Sandra is there to assist you the whole time. Sandra,
I really am.
before you
Yes.
go on, I have another question that someone's asking about the fabric. What type of fabric and brand do you recommend, and why?
Well, I've had people ask me, can I just bring, prints to the workshop because I own a lot of them and I don't want to buy batik fabrics or hand-dyed fabrics. And I hear that hesitation in their voice. They're afraid that they don't want to invest in a lot of fabrics that they don't want to use in the future, or they've taken other workshops that use a lot more print fabrics, but it isn't my style. My style, as you can even see from this slide, is more realism. So like, let's take a look at this one. The background fabric that's in this quilt is just a brown batik that you could probably buy in any quilt store, you know, in the country. It's the whole background that I built the whole collage on. I obviously have a lot of green fabrics in these leaves that I liked, and I do a lot of my own hand dyeing, so I did like using my own hand dyed fabrics. When I hand dye fabric, I use again a batik grade prepared for dyeing fabric that I dye with, you know, Procyon dyes to get all the subtle shading of the greens. And of course, we can ink those where we need to add more shadows. So, you know, I've used a little bit of other media in this particular one. I used some, you know, pastels, you know, color wax pastels or other things that we can color on the fabric to change, like Neo Color 2 and Ink Tints. Those are a couple of brand names that are out there in the market that you can color on your own fabric and change the color or add more vibrancy to the fabric that you already have. So there are those kinds of media, but the bottom line is the fabrics that I prefer and I find most easiest to use to get the colors and the vibrancy and the textures that I want are either a very tightly woven hand-dyed fabric like a batik grade or batik fabrics. They don't fray as much and they're very smooth. They have a high thread count, so that it's very smooth when I do add the media. And I think that I'm not worried about, you know, any white edges showing from, you know, fray from a print fabric. So typically I am asking my students to really think about getting some batik fabrics if they don't already own them and love them like I do. But you don't need lots of them. I mean, you need lots of varieties, but not lots of yardage. So if you can start with, you know, fat quarters of different, say for this one, I might go to the store and buy fat quarters of you know, greens, for instance, and pinks and yellows and oranges and reds, and then maybe one whole big yard background for your brown, and it's probably enough to make this collage. Is that a good answer for that question?
I think it was, yes. It helps for folks who aren't sure what kind of fabric to be bringing with them. And a lot of times, especially in Tucson, if folks are coming to that workshop, there are a couple of quilt stores in the area.
Oh,
There's one
good.
close by. So if there was something, we don't do pop-up shops, but if there was something that they wanted to that if there was
We're
something
not to
they
yet.
wanted to buy, that they could certainly, there is a quilt store down just about a mile or two from the venue.
Well, the other wonderful things that happens in a classroom is that, you know, you might be sitting next to somebody who has the perfect orange and you just need like a tiny little snippet for one spot that you missed. So many times in a class situation like that, you will have people that are happy to share a little piece of something with you. It's one of the reasons why being in a class that supports each other is such a lovely experience to have happen.
Yeah,
So oftentimes, yes, people in Santa Fe even went out shopping, and I was like, go, go. I was tempted to go with them, but I did not because I had to stay and teach.
didn't have the
Um,
time,
but
exactly.
but yeah, it's, you know, between, you know, the extra stuff that I bring and all of the piles of fabric in the room, usually if you are missing some tiny little piece of a color that you hadn't really thought that to bring, or the piece that you brought isn't working in the composition and you know it, a lot of times we can help make that happen. Or color our own. I bring media. I show people how to, you know, like, here, start with this fabric, but let's change the color of it now, and you know, let's go color it over here. And so I set up different different tables so that people can try some of those other media. I usually have them with me.
Sandra, do you usually pre-wash your batiks?
I don't. My hand dyeds are all washed because, hand dyed fabrics, the process requires me to start with a prepared for dyeing fabric, dye it, and then I wash it out multiple times to make sure I don't have any extra runoff from any unbound dye. And I use a textile detergent specifically for that purpose. So if you're getting a hand dyed that I dye, it's definitely been washed. But if I am purchasing a batik fabric at my local quilt store, the truth of the matter is I'm not washing it. Typically, I'm not washing the quilts when they get finished. However, I will sometimes mist them lightly with water to block them. And I've not had any issues with dye runoff from commercial batiks fabrics at all.
Great. Thank you.
So I don't, the answer is no, I
And
don't.
one last question, and then I'll let you move on to all your other slides. Remind me of the adhesive that you use. Are there multiple different,
So,
or what do you
yeah,
prefer?
the adhesive that I use, Misty Fuse, I really like it for a couple of reasons. One, it just comes as is kind of like a fine mesh. It doesn't have any backing paper on it. We have to have some, you know, uh, things like parchment paper or goddess sheets in the workshop so that we don't get that stuff on our irons or ironing mats. But it's a very lightweight adhesive. If I fuse a piece of fabric down in my collage that I don't like, it has the ability to pull off pretty easily and swap it out. So it's flexible. But the main reason why I like it so much is that if you finish your quilt, you have to be able to quilt that top. And the Misty Fuse is such a lightweight adhesive that it doesn't gum up your needle. It's not super heavy. The quilts maintain a really soft hand. It's easy to quilt through. I don't own any stock in the company, but I do buy yards and yards and yards and yards of that stuff. It is the best adhesive, I think, on the market for this style of collage. And I really recommend that people buy that. It's not terribly expensive either. It's just helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Back to this quilt you've been looking at for a while. I haven't done a ton of flowers, but I do want to try them once in a while myself. I think they are a more difficult subject if you want to know the truth, unless you happen to have some fabrics that, can change colors over, like the course of a petal with all the fine lines and details. They take a little bit more time because of the amount of details in a flower. So I don't often do a collage with them, but I wanted you to see that I have. This one was from a friend of mine, Karen Wheeler, who is a fantastic gardener. She's posted a picture of this La Vida Loca daylily, and I just loved the colors and the composition of her image, and she gave me permission to use it, and it's about 36 by 48. This is a small little quilt that I've also done that is only 11 by 17. It's called Still Life with Pomegranates. It was published in a little article I wrote for American Quilter magazine back in 2021. It's just a lovely example of a small subject. Not all quilts have to be 36 by 48, but if you're picking a photo to use and you want to make a small quilt, you should also use a small subject. Um, like I said, this one, was from a photo I took of a pomegranate that my neighbor had given me, and I put it on my kitchen counter, and the sun was popping through the window, and I was like, oh, Caravaggio moment with the dark background and the sun hitting the fruit. So I took a photo and used it for this collage, and it still remains one of my favorite pieces. But let's get back to some landscapes.
Yeah.
Gail Fairchild Slot posted this picture and let me use it of Kolob Canyon, which I think is in Zion in Utah. It was an autumn picture, so it's kind of another Southwest kind of a theme. But surprisingly, this valley had lots of trees that were, you know, in a lot of color. And, you know, and the riot of colors that can be in those rocks. We think of the desert landscape as being kind of boring, but it can actually be just alive with color. This is about 34 inches tall by about 28, I think, 27, 28 wide. So it's not a very big piece, but it was definitely a fun piece to do. A different type of landscape, but still a landscape, is this one. Again, Sarah Etzminger let me use this photo. I wanted to have the challenge of doing some mossy rocks. There's a lot of thread work in the moss on these rocks. Um, I loved the movement of the water down this little stream. I could tell that there was snow on the ground in the photo because there's a little bit of snow in a couple of places that hadn't quite melted away. So I call this one Woodland Stream Early Spring, because I think that the water's running, the snow is melting, the moss is, you know, getting green. The leaves are still not back on the trees yet. I loved all the rocks. I love doing rocks. I've done several rock things and I'm still on it. What I tell people about rock quilts or landscapes, they're actually easier to do than people, you know, because, for instance, because if you change something about a rock, nobody will know. But if you change something about a person's face, it's obvious. So, you know, they're actually easier quilts to do than people think. And I definitely enjoyed this one. I loved that the commercial boutique that I found that is sort of in the lower left quadrant of the water, you know, it had some printed wiggles in it, and you wouldn't think that that boutique would have worked so perfectly for that, but it did, you know, to fussy cut out those little pieces. And then the rest of the water is a lot of commercial batiks and hand-dyed fabrics that went in. It's, you know, there's a commercial batik that's in the background that's kind of like, it had a lot of just, you know, subtle grays and green lines in it. And it wound up being my far background trees that kind of fade into the distance. And so that worked out really well. I really appreciated that Sarah let me use this image. She's a textile artist in her own right. And it also is about 36 by 48, and my standard kind of, it's a great working size for a lot of landscapes. And again, this one I think falls into an intimate landscape category. And then, of course, the quilt that's behind me, Toro Weep Overlook from a John Slott photo. You know, he sent me this image to use. And like I said, at first I was a little intimidated by all the color graduations in this particular quilt, but it was one of my favorite pieces. John captured the light reflecting off that river, you know, in the late afternoon sunshine, and it just glowed. So I actually wound up using 2 layers of fabric behind that river to make sure that it looked as light as possible, that there was no shadow of the darker background build fabric that was behind it. There's a little bit of green along the river where things, you know, get some water, but then you get this stark, you know, beauty of the Grand Canyon. I've not been to the Toro Weep Overlook, but John tells me that it's quite the, you know, trek to get up to get this shot. I'm so glad that he did, because like I said, while I was working on this piece, I almost felt like I was there, that I was a part of that landscape. And I can now recognize the image. If I see images of Toro Weep, even from different angles, I know exactly where they're standing, because I know this piece so well after spending, you know, the months that I did to put it together. I want to show a couple other things. This is from a photo that I took. It's Cathedral Rocks in Yosemite. One of the nice things about this one is that, well, I started it as a demo in a Zoom class. I had to show people the process, and I had this image that I'd taken at Yosemite. And so I, quickly traced it up and started a little demo. And then once I'd started it, I was like, yeah, I need to keep going on it. So I finished it out. And one of my friends told me there's a competition called Yosemite Renaissance. And this particular year was 39, because I think it's the 39th year. And they encouraged me to enter my piece in that show. And this show does take quilts, as well as paintings and watercolors, that sort of thing. So I submitted it not with any hopes that it would do well in competition. I hadn't shown it anywhere else. It's not a very big piece. It's about 36 by 24. But I submitted it. It was accepted. I shipped it off, and I did not attend the opening reception of the show because I was elsewhere. But I had a friend that lived in the area, and I asked her, how did this show go? And she said, good for you. You won best of show. And I'm like, you're kidding me. It, they I think they took about 50 entries, and most of those I think were in the traditional art format of paintings. But I love that the judges responded to my piece and awarded it as best of show. I could not have been more surprised. I didn't think that a quilted textile art would hold up, or in the judges' eyes, or could be judged in a way that would be acceptable in that style of format. So to win a best of show ribbon in that show was very meaningful for me. This one also was a big winner this year at Road to California in 2024. It's Rick McGrath was the photographer for that I used, and his valley view of Yosemite with El Capitan and Bridalveil Falls, and this beautiful body of water in the foreground with all of the reflection of the mountains, but also you get to see a little bit of the transparency in the water of the rocks under the water, as well as the rocks popping through the water. I had to dye a lot of fabric for both the sky and the water because I had to, get the clouds, but also, the reflection of the clouds. So it took a lot of hand-dyed fabrics to make this one happen, but it was the director's choice $5,000 award winner at Road to California this January. And I don't think they would mind if I tell you the secret, but it will be their tote bag image for this coming show in January. So I'm very thrilled. It's a little wider than my normal 48. I think this one is about 50 inches because I think I extended a little bit out in a couple of places by 48, and all machine quilted. And there's a couple of
Sandra, is
shots.
it possible to see one of these quilts up close so that they can see the different areas and the different color
And
fabric?
luckily for you, I have a detail shots of that quilt up
I did
right
not.
now. So
Super,
hopefully, yeah. And when I come to a place like Santa Fe, I will bring quilts. I will definitely pack some quilts to go with me, so that you can see some of my work, while you're, there at the show, from different things. You can, if you look at the detail shot of this one, you can kind of get a sense of how I'm putting this together, I think. You can see, hopefully there's a lot of thread changes and color of threads. I want my quilting to, complement the fusing, but not necessarily, you know, predominate when you look at the entire quilt. I don't want necessarily the thread to be the first thing you see unless I intend for that. Like in a foreground grasses, I might use a very thick thread to quilt so that you can really get those textures of the grasses. But if you are in the sky or in the water, I'm using a thread typically to blend in, so that, when you stand back and look at the entire piece, you just see the big sky and the clouds. You don't see all the thread work. Does
What
that make
thickness
sense?
thread do you use?
Anything that matches the color. So like I
Doesn't,
will, I have a lot of wonderful oral fills that are cotton threads, and but you know, I maybe only have 50 colors of those. And so that might sound like a lot of colors, but it isn't. I have probably a couple hundred spools of
Oh, wow.
embroidery thread and with a wider range of colors. So I'll pull those out. If
Mhm.
I'm using thread in a sky, I may go all the way to like a YLI 100 weight silk thread in a pale blue or white. So I will use the gamut of thread, from variegated heavy duty threads, or you know, heavier weight threads, to very fine silk threads and cotton threads and embroidery threads. Sometimes I'm looking for something where I do want a bit of sheen, and I will, love a lovely rayon Madeira thread, and I'll throw that in there. I just use everything that I have.
And Sandra, another person is asking, are you quilting when you do the final texture on your quilts? Is that with a sewing machine?
Yes, absolutely. It would be very difficult to do this kind of work by hand for the reason that you are using, sometimes a couple layers of batik fabrics on your top.
Mm.
Um, certainly a cotton, and then batiks and hand dyes on the top, a layer of batting, and then a layer of backing.
Mm.
Batiks are notoriously difficult to hand quilt through. So number one, I wouldn't use my hand. Number two, I have a lovely sit down, you know, Bernina Q20, machine that only quilts. It's one function is the needle goes up and down, and it doesn't have any other stitches, and it's just up and down. And you move the quilt. So the quilt is
Mhm.
sandwiched together, and you're moving the quilt by hand. So I don't mark any of my quilting stitches. I'm just eyeballing it. I'm matching my thread colors, and I'm trying to imagine where those lines would be in water. A lot of times those are horizontal lines, so in the sky, but in a tree or grasses, it would be in whatever direction I think is appropriate. Um,
Do you
and
have a favorite quilting foot?
It's the Q20 comes with just, I think it's a number 15 foot installed. I'm not using a ruler foot because I don't use, I'm free motion quilting without any kind of ruler guide. It's just back and forth.
I have so many questions, Sandra.
Okay.
Is that okay? I've got lots of
Yeah.
people. So could you answer the question? I mean, when this collage, how are you not, someone's asking, how do you not have a lot of raw edges showing?
Well, that is
Good scissors.
predominantly because of the type of fabric that I'm using.
Uh-huh.
And this is why I really encourage people to come with these tightly woven batiks, commercial batiks,
Mm.
or the tightly woven hand dyes, because if you have, such fine, it's like good sheets. They have a high number of thread count. And the Misty Fuse is a very lightweight adhesive. So I'm not relying on the Misty Fuse to seal the edges like some heavier glue type of uh, fusibles. If there are loose threads when I'm quilting, I will go in and carefully trim those up with a really sharp pair of curved scissors. But typically, I just don't get a lot of fray from these types of fabrics. And it makes for very clean looking work. This, you can see sometimes there's a little bit, it's on some of these small bits, but it's not the look I want. I want a clean edge when I cut it. And I use sharp scissors, good sharp micro serrated scissors for cutting too will help with that.
These are all wonderful questions and wonderful answers. Someone was asking, do you quilt all three layers? And what does the back look like in the end?
Yes, you definitely, it's not a quilt unless it's quilted. That's the definition of a quilt, actually, is that it has to be composed of 3 layers with the quilting stitches all the way front through all 3 layers. So, there's a layer of batting in between. I like pretty thin battings. I like silk battings, I like wool, and I like the bamboo, dream bamboo, all kind of thinner or natural fibered battings. And yes, they are all sandwiched together and they go under the needle. And the back, I don't think I loaded any photos in this PowerPoint of the back of my quilts, but at the end, I'll turn this one around that's behind me. Actually, I have another one that's in my hand, and I'll show that when I'm back on that you can see the back. So let me show the back when we finish with
Okay.
the PowerPoint, because I do have one right here of the. I do have right handy my polar bear quilt, and you can, and I'll be happy to hold that up to the camera so
Okay.
you can see the back.
You can do that at the
Um,
end. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, all right, let's move on. We're almost
Oh,
done.
good.
You know, this is technically kind of a not a landscape quilt, but it's a photo I took of a little boy wading in a little lake near Oakhurst, California, and I just did a very simple figure. I love the details of his face, kind of suggestive. My main reason for choosing this particular one was I wanted to just explore, you know, the movement of water and reflection.
Mm.
So I loved this image. It's a smaller quilt. Again, it's I would say it would be almost as a study in reflection for me. It's about 18 by 24. Um, I think it definitely is wonderful for, you know, a summertime type of an art piece, and I enjoyed the little figure in it and also the reflection. Um, this is another one. Again, you might have noticed reflection is kind of my gig. Whether it's, you know, that like coral wheat behind me with the sun reflecting off the water. This one though was totally a fun quilt that I did this past year called My Brother's Car. Uh,
Mm.
Again, it's not a big quilt, 18, maybe 20, 18 by 24. It's a study for a bigger piece I plan to do next year on automobiles. I know that might not sound like a really fun subject for a lot of people, but my goal of making this quilt was to see if I could get the impression of chrome without using reflective material. So everything that you see in this quilt is you know, it's either grays or blues or whites, but none of it is a metallic fabric or thread. Um, it's all just a study in precision cutting. This is even that little holiday where it is cut out of fabric. It wasn't printed. I cut it out with a little pair of scissors. I hand dyed the fabric for the car, thin quilting threads to kind of get that. But I, you know, you can see my brother's reflection actually in a few places if you look really close. There's a little bit of media involved too in this, but a lot of hand dyes and some commercial batiks. I love having commercial batiks in a piece like this because if somebody comes up to it in the show and they're looking at it, number one, I'm excited that I drew them in and got their attention for a minute. But I also want them to see some of those commercial fabrics and say, I have that same fabric at home. To, you know, to have that emotional connection with people like me who really love fabric. And this was a really fun subject to do. So I think that gets us to the end. For people who've not done any kind of fiber art, you know, themselves, I encourage you to try it. It's definitely something that's been a part of the human experience for thousands of years, and certainly even as newborns, you know, we're wrapped in a blanket, and you know, fiber threads cover our bodies and we sleep under them and we have that textile connection our entire lives. And it definitely is something that's meant a whole lot to me my whole life. All right, I'm going to stop my share here and come back
Sandra, I
on.
just wanted to say, you know, I apologize. I introduced you at the beginning as a quilting instructor. I should have said you are a fiber artist because you truly are an artist, a
Thank
fiber
you.
artist through and through.
Yeah,
There's some
I'm
quilting
totally
in
good.
there.
I'm totally good with any title that you throw at me.
Textiles, fiber, that you name it. You're wonderful. I do have I don't want to keep this, we've gone pretty long so far, and I want to try and get everyone's questions answered. If
All
not,
right.
please.
Let me hold up this quilt so you can see the back of
Okay.
this one really quick to finish with that. This is the back of the polar bear
Oh,
quilt.
oh, that's the back of the polar bear.
I used a black background, solid black on cotton, and that what you see on the background is just uh,
Mm.
the threads from the front foreground quilt coming through. So
Wow. I
this
would say the back is just as gorgeous as the front.
and then see all those crystals that make this sky.
Mm.
That was totally fun to add to. Um,
Thank you.
but thank you.
I have, so a lot of people are asking about, once you have, and again, um, Sandra makes, it may seem overwhelming, these collage landscapes, but Sandra, from the minute you walk in, makes this so easy. But people are asking, once you have your pattern, how do you cut the fabric, the right shape and size, and then position the fabric? Is there I'm trying to explain, it's like almost like doing a puzzle.
Well, actually, we just cut out one piece, we trace it onto a piece of freezer paper, get that, iron to our background. I
Mhm.
have a way that I can expedite the cutting and fusing process with the ceramic blade. And we just start adding little bits of fabric one piece at a time. I kind of avoid the idea of a puzzle because that implies that there's lots of little pieces that you like a puzzle that you have to
Yeah,
reassemble. We just focus on adding one little piece of fabric at a time. And
correct.
and I showed you, that's why I started out with my Zoom with student work, because I want you to see that it is totally doable. That
Mhm.
you come and you do these workshops with me. I support you. I help you choose your fabrics. I teach you how to ink in person. It's a wonderful transformative experience. And I want you to know that I've had very, very few students that haven't accomplished their quilt. Typically, if a student has an issue with they may have a neurological issue with cutting, then this isn't, if you can't cut with scissors, this obviously is not the class for you, because we do a lot of cutting with scissors. But um, I would say that 99.9% of my students over the years have come out of the workshop with a quilt top. And a few, a very small percentage, actually get to the quilting phase in class. Generally say leave your machine at home, bring a lot of fabric, and expect to have a really good time. I will
Yeah,
walk you through the process.
yeah, yeah.
It's not as difficult as it looks.
Right. And once you get the hang of it, people don't want to stop. I mean, I
Yeah,
remember
it's
going into your
yeah.
classroom late at night and people were just addicted. They just,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you start on one little section and people just don't want to finish. They just want to keep on going and going.
Oh, I know. I mean,
Beautiful thing to see.
it is definitely the case where people will be up late at night. I will be so tired. I usually, after about 6 hours of teaching, I've answered 1,000 questions, and I have to go lay down and take a nap and
I
give my
know.
brain a rest because I'm exhausted. It's not the physical tiredness of being on your feet; it's the mental tiredness that happens after teaching for a full day. But it is super rewarding, and like I said, I know that there's at least, probably 5 quilts in Houston that were started this year that were started in a workshop with me. I saw some videos of going through the show and I was like, that one was my class, that was in my class. It's
Aw,
very rewarding to know
yeah,
that people have enjoyed the process, have finished their quilts, and several people have gone on to win big ribbons on their projects. And so that
thank
also
you.
is a testament that it's a great process, and it's a fun technique, and and you can learn it. It's totally
Yeah.
doable.
And Sandra, you teach so much. Do you do online Zooms? We have someone in India that probably won't be able to get over here anytime soon, and was wondering what do you
I
do?
do. You know,
Absolutely.
yes, I do have, if you go to my website, you can find some, you know, Zoom links and small Zoom classes. I do have those available for people. I've had people that have done those little classes and then realized they wanted more. And that's where the in-person teaching makes the difference. The Zoom classes are good and the process is simple and you can learn a lot from a Zoom class. So yes, if you're in India and you want to, and you know, have that Zoom experience, that is available. You know, online classes are available for you. If, however, you feel like you need that one-on-one and you have more of a saturation with the media and more help with choosing your fabrics and getting that one-on-one support, that's where if you're able to go to an in-person, it's the best experience you are going to have. With
Yeah.
any teacher, I'm sure.
I agree. You're right. And so I just wanted to just to remind everyone where we'll wrap this up right now. I wanted to remind everyone where you're going to be with us. You're going to be with us in Tucson, February 3rd to the
I
7th.
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's February 3rd to the 7th. That's going to be in Tucson. And then you'll be back again with us in Bar Harbor
Yes.
in September.
So no,
Which is pretty full already, and it's getting there.
oh, good, good.
Few spots
Um,
left. But again, Sandra tends to just, attract these really creative, fun groups of students who always seem to connect with each other in these classes. I believe you have a lot of students that were with you in Santa Fe that are coming to Bar Harbor with you. So
yeah,
again,
that's absolutely true.
a lot about you, Sandra,
Um,
as an instructor.
I do have groupies that follow me from event to event, and that means that they've enjoyed being with me, and that's exciting. I love the idea of being in a place like Tucson or Bar Harbor where we're going as a group, you know, we're having our meals together. You know, we're going out to dinner and lunch, or you even took us on a little excursion in Santa Fe that was totally fun. Um, you know, so if you feel like you just want to get out of your daily routine and meet wonderful people, quilters are it. We are the group where, you know,
Yeah.
we have a great time and they are just the loveliest people in the world that you'll ever
Well,
meet.
I think you have an incredibly endearing, warm personality that makes everyone feel wonderful. So I appreciate it. One last quick question. If you were to use a one kind of batik, what's the brand that you use? Your favorite?
Oh man, that's impossible to answer
Oh
because
no, I'm
number one is
sorry, I stumped
yeah,
you.
there's so many wonderful batiks. Typically, I think the artisanal hand painted batiks are totally my favorite. You know, but the truth of the matter is there's no batik that hasn't found its way into my stash because everything has like you know, the perfect texture for something.
Yeah.
So the more variety is really the answer. The more,
Okay,
the
that's
better.
wonderful. That's what I love to hear. All right. Well, Sandra, thank you so much for your time and joining us today. And thank you everyone for taking the time out today to join us with Sandra. I know that you just have, inspire all of these landscapes, these
Yeah.
animals. It's just wonderful to see. And again, we cannot wait to be with you in Tucson. Thank you again for your time, Sandra. And this will be recorded for anyone that had to hop off early. Anything more you want to say, Sandra?
No, I look forward to seeing everybody in Tucson. I just want to say I want to go there. It looks like it's going to be an amazing experience. And I know that you even said there's going to be a cowboy dinner coming up.
Yes, you're right. Oh, thank you for reminding me. On Thursday nights, they have a cowboy cookout. So everyone gets to go down to the corral, and there's a real cowboy singing with his guitar. They ring the dinner bell. There's
Oh
fire
yeah,
and
totally going to be
everything.
great.
Yes, it's
Totally
wonderful.
going to be
The
great.
food is
Looking forward to
delicious.
it.
You won't go hungry the entire week, and the staff there is just incredibly friendly, and outgoing and helpful in all ways.
All
So
right. I'll
it's
see
gonna
you
be a
in,
wonderful week. I can't wait to spend it with you.
yep, I'll see you in Tucson. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thanks so much, Sandra. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.